send vehicles out, and the difficult part about it, there were people my age, and you sent them out and they didn't come back, and it really worked on you.
In charge of the motor pool on the front lines of the Korean War, Bob Fitz is still fighting decades after the war. This fight is a battle over one word that means the world to him and so many veterans out there.
That you were in a war, and you were in danger, and you survived.
So who is trying to take the word war out of the Korean War? And what this man is doing to stop it? As he takes us to the heart of the story in his makeshift home museum. Off a quiet alley in a small neighborhood of homes probably built after World War II, a garage stands on this day like so many others. Veterans of different wars inside, different branches, coming together to remember. For Bob Fitz, this means everything. As a veteran of the Korean War, the so-called forgotten war, he is determined to make sure we never forget the sacrifices made there.
My name is Robert Fitz, and my title is Korean War veteran, and I was also National Director for 3 years for the Korean War Veterans Association. In 1952, I was in the National Guard in Southern Illinois. They come around when we were junior in high school and said, join the National Guard, no more wars, and we all believed them. And then we got sent to Camp Cook, California, and we thought we were going as a unit. But they began to fill us in with draftees.
Next thing he knew, he was on a ship to Japan, then on to Korea, where his skills at his family gas station quickly helped him find his value in wartime.
When I first got there, the motor sergeant had gone home. If you're there over a year, you get to rotate and go home. And anyway, they had a 3/4 ton sitting up on the hillside. And I said, well, what's that? Oh, we can't get it running. We can't get it running. We worked on it. And I said, I bet I can. So I went up there, and about an hour later, it was running. How'd you do that? Well, I said, I just know what I'm doing, you know. So I think that probably, with the old master sergeant, saw that I knew what I was doing and had the abilities to perform. Of course, I grew up around a filling station in Southern Illinois, and I knew vehicles, and that was a part of it. But it was a good kick in the pants for me to believe in myself.
He quickly climbed ranks from corporal to staff sergeant, now in charge of the motor pool, about a mile or so from the front lines. His men moved ammo, food, and personnel back and forth.
We would send vehicles out, and the difficult part about it, there were people my age, and you sent them out and they didn't come back, and it really worked on you. But we did the job. We got the job done through the summer, and then through the winter. Of course, you live outside all the time, and a lot of sea rations and stuff like that.
So you had send people out for specific duties.
Yes.
And worry that some of them would not come back.
Right, and I did have some experiences of sending them out, and they didn't come back.
One of those losses still so fresh in his mind decades later. A young driver who offered to go back to the front lines in place of another who came up with excuses not to go.
And the guy was standing there, and he said, Bob, he said, they need me. He said, I go back up there. I said, hey, you've been running up there for quite a few weeks now. And at 4 o'clock that evening, they called me and said, come get your Jeep. The driver and the lieutenant was killed.
All of them faced real dangers on a daily basis, but they had a job to do. Did you guys ever come under attack?
Yes, and we would, not major, but the thing we would do, the North Koreans would sneak through, and then they'd go back in the back of us and build fires. And that was a signal to fire. And of course, we always tried to get up against a hillside, and the shells would go over us. But it didn't happen very often, but once in a while it was, you know. And then of course, when we were moving troops up to the front lines, we got up there, we were in danger, of course. And then we got to come back to the motor pool. But could have been hit any time.
Some made it home, some did not. And after the war, Bob looked for work, and he found his calling in ministry. But his service to his country remained such a big part of his life, representing Korean War veterans on the local level, then as state commander, and all the way to become national director. Fighting for those who came home and those who did not. Still fighting now, in the years that most are sitting back in their rocking chairs.
Well, over the years, I mean, there's been many things that you've had to fight for, and a lot of Korean War veterans in particular, as we hear about the so-called forgotten war, stuck between World War II when people were war-weary and Vietnam. And then now another battle for you to face and to fight for when potentially they want to change the name.
Yes. Well, we got some guys come in the last few years. They're not been in Korea, but they came in to change the whole outfit. And they came in with the idea they wanted the word war moved out of our Lego and call it the Korean veterans, but not the Korean War veterans. And so I wrote a letter, and it went out to everybody. And I said, well, what am I going to do then? Take World War II, World War I, Vietnam, and all that, you know. Take the word war out. But I said, that's part of our Lego, and that's them guys that sacrificed their life. And they still need the honor of being a part of it.
Because again, the battle for decades has been whether we're going to call something a conflict or a war.
Yeah.
And men and women died to earn, if you will, the distinction of a war.
Sure.
And now you're not going to let them take it away.
No, we're not going to let them. And I wrote a letter, and I'll give you a copy of it. And I've had help doing it. Tim has been very helpful and putting it in words. And so we've been sending the letter out, and the last thing we knew, they'd kind of settled down about taking the word war out. But these guys, that's a word that helps you, that you were in a war, and you were in danger, and you survived.
So he opened his home garage, transformed into this free museum, collecting as much as he can get his hands on, and sharing with anyone looking to learn a little history.
Well, this is the way it is when you're walking up and down doing patrols and stuff. And this is when they came in by sea and cut the country in half. And then they either killed the ones, South Koreans that were south, or the north ones took off. And this is in North Korea. When they moved up there, they moved up too fast and had one of the coldest winters going. And then they got overrun by North Korea, and China got into it. And so the ships came in with supplies, and they realized they were getting overrun. And so they dumped all the supplies and blew them up. And then they picked up about 100,000 South Korean women, men, or North Korean men and women that were up there and took them back to South Korea on the ships. And I met a lady in Washington, D.C., and she said, "You remember when they were picked those people up?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't there, but I remember talking about them." And she said, "Well," says, "my mother was a baby then. And she said, I wouldn't be here if they hadn't picked her up and brought her here." The Buccaneer, this is the motor pool that I was in when I got there. And they kept on charge of the motor pool. And this is the Buccaneers flag. I don't know how that came about, but we had a bunch of them. And somehow I've survived one for the last 30 years, 40 years, you know. And I thought it was that. And this is reality. Of course, that's Staff Sergeant.
Tell me about these headlines here.
This is a newspaper, a copy of the newspaper that was printed in Illinois at the beginning of the Korean War. And we had it laminated. I found it in my archives and didn't realize it was there, but I found it and I got it out, and we took it down and got it laminated and put it up. And this is actually a copy of the war as it came out in Illinois when the war started in the beginning of the war. And this is some of the phases of operations that went on during the Korean War and how they maneuvered it. This here is something that reminds us it's a person got killed, and the guys buried him and marked his grave and put his dog tags in his mouth, and then they buried him and they went on, because when you're moving up, we have a lot of snipers and we don't know what happened, but anyway, we moved on up and they would come along later and pick up the guys that had got killed and do the proper things with them.
Why does that photo in particular touch you so much?
Because I could have been there. That could be me.
But make no mistake, this isn't about him. It's about making sure that we never forget.
And it's important that it's there for all history to know.
And I do not want guys to get left out as the forgotten, and we're known as the Forgotten War anyway.
And because of his work here and his fighting spirit still alive and well, many will discover what happened in a war so long ago, so far away, from his small, free garage museum on this quiet alley with so many stories to share. Please subscribe, comment, and share with a friend to help us grow.